Welcome to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Join us as we dive into the world of endurance sports, exploring everything from nutrition to training and how these elements shape your everyday life, both on and off the race course. Hosted by Coach Justin, certified run and triathlon coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing, along with Coach Katie, a registered dietitian specializing in sports nutrition and owner of Fuel to Run. We're here to share insights and real-world advice to help you thrive on your journey. Here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast is where your journey begins. Welcome, everyone, to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin. I'm here with Coach Katie, and today's episode is number 71, and we are talking about athlete identity. So this is going to be part of our Coach's Corner series, where we've put out a lot of like content heavy instruction kind of information out there lately. So I wanted to take a step back and do something that's a little bit more personal, a little bit of a softer topic. It's definitely going to be, I think, a little bit of an emotional topic. I know for me in particular, because some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about really hits close to home for me, the way that I've kind of gone through my journey over the past decade or so in my endurance journey. I have a feeling that it will hit home close to Katie as well. So let's go ahead and we're going to get started. Let's start with a little bit of our housekeeping. So again, we thank you for the time that you spend with us. And if you are enjoying the information that we're putting out there, the blogs and the podcast episodes and everything else, we would highly appreciate leaving a review and a comment wherever it is that you're consuming your podcast materials from, whether that be Spotify, Amazon, iTunes, or what have you. We would really appreciate comment and review. We felt strongly from day one that we weren't going to monetize this podcast. So we don't have ads, we don't have sponsors. So the one thing that really does help get the podcast out there and make it easier for people to find us are your reviews and your comments. So again, please consider leaving a review. It just takes like a minute or so. Those are highly, highly appreciated. Thank you. We also have the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group. It's a private group on Facebook. We're growing out the community. It's a place where we're also pushing out additional content from the podcast. And so if you would like to join, all you have to do is just go in and answer one simple question. That's all it is. We'll let you right on in, and we can start to grow this community. You'll have access to more information from us. We'll get to the point where we'll start having Q&A sessions as people become more and more active. So we want to bring you episodes that you want to know, that you want to hear, you want to learn. If there's questions that you have, we want to address those and bring you some information to help you. So please consider joining the group. Also, we are active coaches. So if you are interested in coaching, you're looking for somebody to either take over the reins from your training plan creation, or you just really feel overwhelmed and not sure on what workouts to do, what order to do them in, how to manage weekly volume in the grand scheme of things, we are here to help. We'd love to meet with you and talk with you. So you can reach out to Coach Katie at fuel2run.com. She does dietetics across all sports and run coaching. You can reach out to me at tabularasaracing.com. I'm Coach Justin. So I do individual sport, also multi-sport, so swim, bike, run, endurance, hiking, strength training, whatever it is that you're interested in, we can find a plan that works for you. And so then all you have to do is just execute and learn. So feel free to reach out to us if that is something that you're interested in pursuing or at least learning a little bit more about. So I think that covers kind of our housekeeping stuff. So Katie, how have you been feeling lately? Been doing all right?
Pretty good. Yeah, I'm good. There's not too much craziness going on or anything. Just trying to prep for my marathon training, which starts it's kind of officially starts in like 2 weeks, but I've been like training, but
All
I'm
right.
just like officially training in like 2 weeks. So I don't know. I've got excitement and then I'm also a little bit anxious about it. Just trying to finalize some things in my training plans. Yeah, that's yeah, I think you understand. It's like when you've got
I
that
do. Yeah.
start, it's been something I've felt like was long ways off, and now it's not. It's like, "Oh, it's only a couple weeks away." So
Yeah, now it's
that's
here.
it. It's here. So yeah, I'm getting ready for that. Yeah, sorry, I have a bearded dragon in here that I had to put on the floor because he was making noise. So
Making noises.
I realize now that I have some creatures in here still with me. So if I have to like put on mute and go like shoo them out of the office, I'll do
It's all
so
good.
that's what I'm doing. But how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. So at the time that we were recording this podcast, I graduated PT. So
Oh,
that was
okay.
my last appointment with my PT. Now I'll just go into kind of a maintenance mode and kind of progress things on my own, start to supplement more with some massages because I suspended that while I was going through PT, but now the massages are helpful. So I'm thinking like
Mhm.
once a month, just kind of go in there an hour and a half and just let her do her thing. But
Nice.
the shoulder is feeling better, getting some better range of motion, which was kind of the primary focus of my PT lately. And so this is Saturday. So we're recording on Saturday. So tomorrow is going to be my first swim in a really long time. So probably since December. So it's been several months since I've been in the water as I've been dealing with this shoulder issue. So we'll see how tomorrow's swim goes. I'm in
Right.
week 3. I'm starting week 3 of my couch to 5K run as I'm returning to running after dealing with the post tibia tendonitis from Florida. And so I'm hoping that there's like a sunshine on the horizon now. So as things
Hope
start to
so.
return, just trying to see if all the work that I've put in is paying off. So
Right. Yeah. It's exciting, but it's hard to, you're kind of like anticipating, hoping that,
yeah,
you're starting, there's pain, not any pain. And
you
so
become
that's,
so accustomed to like the pain that it almost comes with like a little PTSD, you know? So it's
yeah.
like after you've been injured, then you become so finely in tuned with what your body is telling you. And it takes a lot of skill and a lot of experience to know what signals are real and what
Hmm.
signals, are worth investigating versus, oh, that's just now my brain is really trying to activate muscles that haven't been worked as much. And so it's not that I'm injured still or that I'm re-injuring things. I'm re-engaging things in a different way. And so it takes a lot of effort to really differentiate what those signals mean. And
Hmm.
it's hard, especially after you become injured and now you're start returning to sport to not get buried in the signals that you're feeling. So
Yeah.
that's going to
Makes
be an
sense.
interesting task.
A challenge, yeah. Eventually, yeah, hopefully it goes okay. I don't like I've had that experience with injuries and I kind of know what you're talking about because you're sort of always anxious about it too and thinking
Hmm.
about is this going to come back or or you feel a little tweak or something weird and it's just
Yeah.
it's hard to know. Yeah, well hopefully that goes okay as you're adding the running back in because you have taken a substantial amount of time kind of off and doing a lot of the rehab
Yeah.
for it, so hopefully but yeah, let's dive
Yeah. Let's
into
get started.
this
So
episode. So I think well, let's start first because it was this whole episode came about because the last time we recorded, you had mentioned there was something you kind of somebody posted maybe on Instagram or on social media, and
yeah.
it kind of got us thinking a little bit about
It did.
this
Yeah. I
topic, a
saw a
little bit,
post
yeah.
in like one of the groups that I'm in on social media. And I think it was on Facebook. And it was a picture of a runner. And the caption said, I am a runner. Your approval is not needed. And it got me thinking that I understand the principle behind this statement. But the question that immediately came to my mind is, well, why are you seeking the approval to begin with? You know,
Yeah.
if you say that you're a runner, be a runner and
Right,
be happy with
yeah,
that. And who cares if people are going to say, no, what you're really doing is you're a run walker, so you're not a runner, or you're a jogger. If both feet are on the ground, you're not running, that kind of thing. So it's like, I don't understand this need for approval as the definition of your identity, I guess is
right,
where we're
yeah.
taking this.
It's that kind of, like, assumption that people like, if you're a runner and you're so that's your identity, then why did you even post that? 'Cause it's like, does
Yeah.
it it
Why do
it
you need
doesn't
it?
it shouldn't matter that anybody's approval, and, that tells me that maybe you're questioning
Yeah.
it's not so much that you're worried about whether somebody else is approving of you as a runner. It's that you're maybe questioning your own. It's like this internal questioning, am I really a runner? And then you're sort of manifesting it as like, I am a runner, like, and I don't care about your approval, but there's very few people out there are actually even probably passing any judgment towards this person, because
Yeah.
most of us who are engaging in endurance sports are not really worried about what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we're more worried about what our own training is, or I'm more worried about what my athletes are doing, and if I'm training someone and I'm doing a run walk program, I'm not telling them they're not a runner. You know what I mean? I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, it seems like maybe there's more of like an internal questioning in this of like, I am a runner. I don't care about your approval. It's kind of me thinking maybe they're not really sure in their
Yeah.
identity. So that's where we kind of got on this topic of identity and what it means. What is this identity that we have as an endurance athlete? And we all both have kind of our own journeys with
Right.
this identity piece, either, gaining is, at what point do we call ourselves an athlete, or when we've had something happen, such as an injury or, burnout or something kind of where we've lost that identity. Cause that, and maybe so we can have a deeper discussion when neither one of us are psychologists. So this is really more of a coach's corner coming from our own perspective. But I think there's a lot of benefits to kind of having that and identity. And then there can be sometimes drawbacks as well. So
Yeah.
we'll kind of talk about our own experiences. I don't know where we want to start.
I think I can understand to a certain extent the role that social media plays in the
Mhm.
formation of our identity, especially if you're new to the sport. I think it's very easy because social media is the first place that you go to for information. I'm looking for other people's experiences and things like that so that I can learn how to get started on my own journey. So I'm going to
Right.
try and reap the benefits of other people's past experiences and try and forego the hardships that they went through, which is completely
Yeah.
reasonable and
Either
completely
that, or I
rational.
think it's sometimes to get, like, motivation, like, because sometimes when you see other people or you hear other people doing hard things or kinda going out there and maybe training, I think that can be very inspirational and help motivate,
But
and
I think
that's
it's a double-edged sword.
it's double yeah, because 'cause you're now
If you're
comparing
if you're
yourself
Yeah,
too,
because
right?
that's
Yeah.
exactly what I was about to do. You go to these places for the motivation, and then you start to see their performance, and now you start to compare their performance to your performance,
Yeah.
and it's
And
apples to
they're how
oranges.
they're
And
fast,
so
like
it's
or
just
it's like
then it starts to really question, like, what they're doing is motivating and inspiring, but it feels so overwhelming because I feel so subpar compared to
yeah.
what I'm seeing out there. I think it's a it can I think I'm trying to figure out like how to say this. I think the intention is good, but the practicality of it tends to have some drawbacks that a lot of people don't maybe consider. So I think the idea of social media is good. The way that it may be implemented and used definitely has some significant
Well,
drawbacks. There are
let
some
me just put
benefits,
this
but
out there. Like, most people aren't it's just like many things on social media, and this also goes for running and training and endurance activities, is most people aren't always posting the bad days.
true
Most
that.
people aren't saying, like, a picture of them, on the side, they couldn't finish their race because they had to drop out, and some, yes, you see it a little bit, like, maybe, but a lot of times people are posting the great workouts. They're posting the good days, the workouts that went really well, the races that went really well, and they're not posting generally the things that aren't going well or the struggles they're having. I mean, yeah, yes, there are people that are, but not the vast majority of people just want to post, oh, this is all going great. Look how fast I am. Look at this workout, this really hard workout I just did. And that's true for everything on social media. Everybody's posting all the good
Yeah.
things. They're not posting all the bad things. So all you see is, oh, look at that person. Looks like they're always traveling and doing great things. And then you're kind of feeling like maybe what you're doing is not adequate or something like that,
Yeah.
And I think I just want to point that out too, is that that you kind of get into that comparison trap, and you're not seeing, people aren't posting those
You're not seeing real
struggles.
life.
So you're not seeing real life. You're just seeing what's the great things and all the crazy things, people are
Yeah.
doing. And then you see, a lot of people that are followed on social media. I mean, there are like, just people who run a lot that post, like kind of run or endurance athlete or influencers, which is kind of like also arguably maybe not a great thing. But then there's also the like elite athletes. And so
Right.
I get into that. I sometimes have to be careful about that because I'll see what an elite athlete is accomplishing or what their training looks like. And I know I've been in that place before where I'm like, oh, maybe I should be doing that, or I need to be running more mileage because this person runs 120 miles a week. You know what I mean? This is
Yeah.
like, even I find myself getting kind of caught up in that. So I think that's probably partially why I don't actually follow or really go onto social media and follow like a lot of athletes. I like mostly just watch animal videos and things like that, but 'cause I just
Yeah.
know myself better. I wanna just do what I'm doing and be, like, confident in what I'm doing, and so I don't really love always unless some I feel like I'll only follow someone if I truly feel like they're genuine and they're putting out, like, more of their authenticity of, like, what's going well, and they tend to also post when they're struggling. I won't follow somebody if they're always posting positivity and 'cause it's
Yeah.
like, that's not life, you know? So it just sometimes you just have to be discriminatory about what you're posting, and then, I think too are you on Strava,
I
Justin?
have a Strava account. I don't monitor it. I don't
Okay,
log
so
into Strava.
so I think that's there's
Yeah.
a whole
No.
other piece here of people on Strava and, like, comparing and because Strava has a very interesting way of, if you do this section or this what do they call it, like, segment as fast as possible or as the fastest, that you're, like, crowned, you know what I mean, as the king of the whatever,
Yeah.
you're the fastest to do that particular segment, right? And they have all these segments that you can do, and then there's King of the Mountain, and there's all these, people are just yeah, that's another whole trap too, is that if you're on there and you're running, I think there can be a tendency to wanna look every run look, like, amazing to, like, prove
Yeah.
to everyone that you're "Oh, I'm a fast runner. I'm gonna run" like, I can't do a 9-minute mile, or I can't do a 10-minute or an easy recovery run because it's not gonna look good on my Strava, you know?
Right.
So there's a whole other, like, piece to it too, just beyond maybe, like, TikTok or Instagram or Facebook, there's a whole like, that whole realm of Strava, I think is also kind of can be great motivating thing, like, something that really motivates people because they can post on there and they can, like, see what other people are doing and, like, put their own workouts on there, but then I think that can also be dangerous because people like, personally, I don't care. So I don't even
Yeah.
hardly check it, you know what I mean? I have a private account. I don't let very many people in unless I know who they are to, like, follow me. I do it because I like some of the other aspects of it that gives you some training insights and things like that, and it's just kind of you can map out your own routes and things like that, but I don't actually care. I run a
Yeah.
lot of the same roads all the time, like, I don't do anything really interesting. I go out and I run easy a lot, like, I don't care if people think that's
Everything is just logged and compared, and it's just
I know.
wears on you. So it's just like,
Right.
what's the point
Yeah,
of
what's
doing
the
it?
well, it's just kind of like that's the thing I think too is part of the being an athlete, I think that's this identity thing we're talking about. I think that's the thing is you have to be confident. I think it comes with part of that is coming with this confidence that you're doing what you're doing and you're following a plan that either, you have a coach or something that's maybe creating for you or you're creating or you're found online or however you've come across
Yeah.
this plan and having this confidence that you're following it the way it's supposed to be followed and that and confidence in your own training and not trying to let in too much of that outside
Right.
noise, and it comes with that I think that's for me, it's just like I don't care if it looks like I had a really slow day today because that was the purpose. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Right.
I don't care if people were impressed with that or not because that I have a very distinct purpose with this particular day and trying to kind of let go of that, like, wanting to impress people and just being really confident in what you're doing.
I know that sometimes, like, if so, it's also a susceptible where when you go to a race or something, or you're in a group ride or whatever in a group workout, and you start to look at the gear that everybody else has. And I know that
Yeah.
I'm speaking from my own experience, right?
Mhm.
This is my own insight, was that because it's something that I do and I struggle with is, I'll go into transition for a triathlon, and I'm looking at everybody else's bikes, and, we're seeing like $10,000 bikes, race wheels, and people have, form goggles that's spitting out their paces while they're swimming. They're incredibly fast, wetsuits and carbon plated shoes. And it's so easy to sit there and look at my stuff. And I'm just like, my bike is from like 2014. I've got clip on air bars. It's a road bike. I don't have carbon plated shoes. I have normal goggles. I swim in a wetsuit that works for me, which may not, quote unquote, be faster for the general person. And so it's really easy for me to get trapped into that and say, man, what could I do with a $10,000 bike? Really like a nice time trial, like, triathlon bike with, it's dialed in, the position's good. How would that improve my run? It's really easy for me to walk down that path just by looking at somebody else's stuff. But what's even better is when I'm riding by on my $1,200 bike that I bought, like 7 years ago, and I'm passing the guy on the $10,000 bike.
Yeah.
That's really
Yeah, I'm the
rewarding.
same. I was gonna say the same thing. I mean, when I've done triathlon, I think I mentioned this before, but I bought like a $400 Trek.
Yeah,
It was carbon. It was like the first carbon Trek that they made, and it was 1992. I don't know, something really long, like a long time ago, let's just say. And yeah, that's what I used because I was a poor college student. I didn't have money to buy some
right.
sort of $10,000 bike. I couldn't even afford $1,000 bike. So that is what I used, and I think I did put clip-on aero bars, and I did find a lot of satisfaction in especially going uphill because that was my strength. I was a good
Yeah,
hill climber. Just zooming up the hill, like, when there's hills in a race, and just way past those people with the fancy bikes. But, yeah, I think there was a little bit of, like, I think it's hard not to be like, "What are people thinking about me?" But I'm like, I don't know. It wasn't like I was ever going to be a professional triathlete, but I was pretty good. I was okay. So it was like, I don't know. Yes, maybe I would have been slightly faster with the faster bike. I think we have to all remember that it sometimes doesn't matter as much as you might think. And
yeah,
and sometimes I found it really ironic that these people would have these fancy bikes, but maybe their training wasn't fantastic or they weren't eating are fueling their bodies, like, correctly. Like, I'm making some assumptions here based off kind of maybe people I've talked to, but it's like it's so you always have to remember when you're seeing that, it's like, sure, they might have the really expensive things and the really nice stuff, but sometimes I think that's just the surface, you know what I mean? Like, we don't
yeah,
know every aspect, so to compare yourself totally, I almost had a sense of pride over time with my bike. It's like,
yeah.
"Okay, yeah, I don't look like I'm maybe, belong here or something, but, I'm here and I'm still kicking butt on my treks."
Yep. I will say that I wanted to pull the trigger this year and get my first triathlon, like time trial bike. And I had it all planned and I really, really wanted it. And then I started thinking about, okay, what is it that I'm doing this year?
Uh,
And then I started looking at the money and I was like, man, that's how much money I'm going to have to fork over to, because if I'm going to do the bike, I want to do the bike that I really, really want. And I'm just going
mhm.
to go for it. But I was just
Go
like,
for it.
man, that is a lot of money. And I don't know if I have a race this year that justifies, spending that kind of cash on it. So there's my bike sitting right there beside me on the trainer, ready to be ridden. Uh, and so,
I did buy a triathlon special bike, and I hated it. I
yeah,
that thing was I just can never get comfortable. I want to enjoy this as well. I don't wanna be doing this and not enjoying it either, so, yeah. But I wanna I think, let's kind of step backwards a minute first, and I
yeah,
wanna like, I want you to talk a little bit about because I think your perspective on this is interesting because I've been a runner since the age of 12, like, so I've kind of don't remember, like, that's such a young age. It was never like I had this sort of contemplation of, like, "Am I really a runner?" It just sort of happened. slowly, and I never really realized it was happening till it was like, yeah, I guess I'm a runner, but I never really had some of those conflicts that people have who are maybe an adult athlete trying to get into the sport and kind of wondering if they're really truly, a triathlete or truly a runner because that was just not my experience. So I'm curious with you, with your past and history and kinda getting into the sport later and then having this almost identity change, essentially. Like, I wanna hear your perspective on that because I have more some identity issues that have happened throughout the years with running, like, when I've kinda lost running for whatever reason, and I wanna talk
Yeah.
about that, but I think let's start with your experience just getting into it and how was that for you? How did you when did you know what happened with your identity, over
So
that period?
yeah, so my story is when I first got started, I had gastric bypass, and I had spent probably about a year and a half trying to teach my body how to move, given my new body structure and the weight wasn't holding me back now. But I still had to figure out like how to move it and how to control it. And so, I started running, and then I got into triathlon. And I can honestly tell you that it has just been over the past, like, maybe 2 years that I started to refer to myself as an athlete.
Okay, wow.
Um,
'Cause you've
for
you've been at it for, like, 10 years.
I've been doing this for over a decade. Yeah, over a decade. 2 full Ironman under my belt. I did my ninth half Ironman last year, but it wasn't until fairly recently that I started to refer to myself as an endurance athlete because I never
Mm,
found myself to be particularly athletic. It's like, do I do push-ups? Can I do pull-ups? That kind of stuff. And so, how much can I bench press? See, that was the kind of stuff like I would use as a barometer for calling myself an athlete. And so I never really found myself doing those sorts of things. And so I just kind of discounted it and said, yeah, I do triathlons, but I never really talked about myself as a triathlete. I
mm.
always talked about it in terms of the sport that I did, not, who I was. And that's taken a lot of effort on my part to kind of say, you know what? Yeah, I do the sport of triathlon, but I am a triathlete. I am an endurance athlete. This
Uh-huh.
is now not just something that I do, but it's become who I am. And I think I kind of it started to realize that it was that way when I started to confront the possibility of not being able to do triathlons anymore. I couldn't sustainably run all the time. So my focus of just being a pure runner, my body just doesn't hold up to it. And so I knew that that was out. And I was like, with my shoulder problems and the issues that I've dealt with, I was like, well, okay, can I just swim? No, I can't really swim because I can't do it as much as I would need to do it in order to become a really good swimmer. I could bike a lot. And so, just being a cyclist could be, possible, but you don't find very many larger guys that are cyclists. They're usually like these really thin, lean guys. Cause I mean, that makes a big difference. And so when I went through my rotator cuff surgery and then my elbow surgery, uh, I was forced to kind of take a step back and kind of get into endurance hiking because it was the only thing that I could really do. I really, really struggled. And so the various injuries that I've had throughout the year, so I've had that experience on who am I now?
Mhm.
I can't do the sport that I like and that I love that's been such a big part of my life. I can't do that now. So who am I? Am I still that person or do I have to reinvent myself and find something different and define myself in a different way? And that's
I
been
mean,
really, really
yeah.
hard.
I wonder too, I mean, because you had the surgery and then you kinda got into training for triathlon, but you never you had a hard time calling yourself a triathlete.
Yeah.
But you had to reinvent yourself a little bit at that point, right? To be doing triathlon, even if at the time you didn't call yourself a triathlete, you had to I mean, that's a huge going from somebody who maybe wasn't very I'm assuming wasn't very, like, athletic to now pursuing something that's very athletic. I mean, that in itself is kind of its own transformation, and then you kinda get to this point where you're doing it for a while, then you have this injury. I just thinking, like, at some point, you've had to, like, reinvent yourself but
I think
then
the
yeah.
difference was that when I started to get into the sport, like I said, I defined myself as like I do triathlons, but I never said, yeah, I'm a triathlete. I think because I never really saw myself doing athletic things. It's really
Okay.
hard to explain and kind of like put the words into it, but I can tell you that I think most of it was definitely from a mental perspective. So regardless of what my body was doing, this was a mental thing on like how I defined who I was. And the reason that I think I struggled for so long and probably still do to a certain extent to this day is when I still look in the mirror, I still see that guy before surgery. So I still see that 365-pound person where I'd look at that picture now and I can just see the look in my eyes. It's just empty. And I still see that guy. I still see
Interesting. Yeah.
the pack-a-day smoker who couldn't walk down a city block without having to stretch his back because my back was so jacked up from the weight that I was carrying around. I still see that guy all the time, even to this day. And so I think that that's what's really kind of kept me back from calling myself an athlete and really defining myself that way and just sticking with, "Oh, I do these sports," but never really allowed it to really define who I was. But then when I got to the point where I thought that I was losing it, that really was eye-opening and life-shaking almost to a certain extent, where
Mm-hmm.
it's just like, no, this is who I am. And because I miss it
Right.
so much and I'm so afraid of losing it, because if I lose it, what are the chances of me going back to that same guy? What
Right.
are the chances of me becoming him again? And there's a lot of fear there. Even to today. I mean, there's still a lot of fear. And I think it's common with people that have gone on these kind of like weight loss journeys and they've completely transformed themselves and now they're active in things, and they're doing stuff that they never thought that they could do. There's always that fear that's in there that could be taken away at any moment because you start to gain weight or, something happens or you get
Yes.
injured and you start to regress and then it just snowballs and then you've lost it. That's a massive fear. And so I really kind of had to force myself to start calling myself an endurance athlete because once I started to do that, then I think things started to shift. I wouldn't see that guy in the mirror as much, even though I still do from time to time. The frequency in which I could see him in my mind's eye started to decline a little bit because I think that mental shift started to redefine my inner monologue and really
Mhm.
start to allow it to sink in and it wasn't the transformation in the journey. It wasn't all the races and all the medals and all the finish times and all that stuff. It was the fear that it was going to be taken away and what my life would look like without it is what really drove that identity home.
It's interesting. It's like when you don't really realize kind of what you got until it's like maybe
Yeah,
there's a threat of it
exactly.
being taken away. But I find that also very fascinating that what you just said, that it was like when you were able to embrace that identity, that old you
Uh,
sort of vision, that obviously you aren't that's just something that you were in the past, an identity you've had in the past, but it wasn't until you've sort of taken on this new identity of being a triathlete that you just saw that old identity less and less. Like, it was almost until and I think that's just something I really want people to think about who are maybe in a similar situation, because I deal with this a lot with people I work with who are trying to lose weight, or they're kind of almost in like where you were years ago, where they're trying to make changes, positive changes, where they're maybe trying to incorporate more exercise or eat healthy, but they are not seeing themselves as an exerciser,
yeah.
or somebody that eats healthy. Like, they don't identify as that. And I honestly think that if it's hard to do, you can't just like wake up and be like, I am a runner, I am a triathlete, or I am someone who exercises. That is who I am. It's like, that might feel very like, to wake up and look in the mirror and say that might seem like a little
Yeah.
bit like, I don't know. But I do think it might be worth trying. It's like that self-talk. I mean, you kept doing it despite feeling that identity. Like,
Mhm.
there was something else driving you to continue to train and to continue. And maybe that was that fear because you didn't want to go back to weighing 365 pounds and being that guy. I don't know. But for a lot of people, I think it's just that they'll tell themselves, I'm not an exerciser. I'm not someone who exercises. They'll like sort of have that internal self-talk, or like a runner wanting to start a running program, but they're telling themselves like, I'm not a runner. I'm not like these other people who run. and they're maybe in that comparison trap, or they're just sort of like their internal self-talk is saying that, then yes, then you're probably not gonna have I'm gonna say this straight off, like, you're probably not gonna have success, especially if you're sort of outwardly saying you're, like, identifying as not that, you know what I mean? Like, or you're
Right.
telling yourself you have to really I think it's when you take on this sort of identity of this is who part of who I am, it maybe isn't the entire thing that defines me because you don't want that to be your entire definition of who you are, but to say, when you can make that adjustment to like, I am someone who exercises, this is important to me, or I am someone who runs, I am someone that is an athlete, like, then I think you're more apt to continue to do it because that is part of who you are versus like
Yeah.
the opposite of like I tell people that I think even that Atomic Habits book by James Clear, he mentions that in that book. I can't remember like what chapter or what part of the book, but it is interesting kind of that sort of self-talk and like how we identify ourselves can be kind of what makes or breaks us in our pursuit of change or becoming somebody different than who we are, if that makes sense. So I just
It
like
matters a lot more than what people think.
mhm.
The things that you, not necessarily the things that you say to others, but what you tell yourself, that matters so much. And I don't really kind of understand the whole self-deprecating thing where it's just like, because I'll go into these running groups and they'll say, I'm a slow runner or, this kind of runner. Let's get rid of the whole adjective before runner. Let's just
Right.
say you're a runner.
Mhm.
Pace has nothing to do with it. Pace doesn't tell me what kind of caliber runner you are, how good or how bad you are. It tells me
How far
nothing
you can go, like, you could be,
because
quote, unquote, "a
it's
slow
one,
runner," but
it's, yeah,
you could run for 3 days, one of those people that can just, like, run forever and, like, you're amazing, right? Like, I mean, amazing either way, but I'm just saying, like, it doesn't just because you're like, what is it, like, slow a AF or something like
I don't really understand it. But I think to a certain extent, I can relate to it. Because I
Right.
mean, I've done the same thing, and it's taken a lot of work, individual, like, introspective work for me to stop doing those sorts of things. It's like, hey, I'm a slow runner, or I'm a slow swimmer, or I'm a bad hill climber for on the bike. That kind of stuff I hear all the time from
Mhm.
athletes. And it's just like, well, if you keep saying it, it's going to be true, and it's going to
Right.
continue to be true until we
Mhm.
change our inner monologue. Your identity will be consistent with what you say it is. So if you say I'm a slow runner, then you are going to continue to identify as that slow runner.
Mhm.
You will never break free from the ability to identify as a runner or even as a good runner if you keep telling yourself that you're not a good runner and that you're
Right.
classifying
Yeah.
yourself as something else.
And it's almost like, again, because you're sometimes people are afraid of judgment from others, so I'm just gonna go ahead
Mhm.
and label myself before somebody else has a chance to label me.
Yeah,
So
it's a
I'm
little
gonna label
preemptive.
myself yeah, like, okay, I'm gonna tell everyone at the group, like, I'm just a slow runner, so, I'm gonna hang back or whatever, but because I don't want people to judge me, I'm gonna
Beat
put
them
that
to the
out there.
punch. Yeah.
I'm gonna beat 'em to the but no, guarantee you, like, I don't know, I mean, I'm speaking for myself here, but in my experience in the running community, but I just feel like most of the time, like, I'm just out there to run, and so I'll just go on my run with like, and if it's in a group, there'll be different varying paces, and I'm not paying at all any attention in any negative way, at least, to anyone behind me or, I might finish and then I'm just excited when everyone else is done because we can all chat and have coffee. I don't know, like, I'm not thinking to myself like, "Well, that person's slow,"
Mhm.
like, I just don't I'm actually very excited when I see people out there running at all sorts of different paces and all sorts of different body shapes and all sorts of different types of people and bodies. Everybody's body shapes are so different and there's so many different types of people. I just love seeing all the different types of people out there running. I guarantee you most runners people who run or people who are out there who maybe even are seasoned runners like myself who've been doing it for a long time, like we're not judging, like we're just happy you're there. You know what I mean? So like I think there's a lot of that, like people just trying to protect themselves by labeling themselves in such a way.
Yeah, I
Or they're
think that's,
trying to beat people to the
yeah,
punch and assuming other people are judging when they're not.
I think that's incredibly, insightful where it's just like, yeah, I think people are trying to beat others to the punch in terms of the label, but people by
Mhm.
nature are self-centered and self-focused.
Like, I guarantee you,
And
I'm more
so,
concerned with my run.
yeah,
I don't care
I
about
could
what
care
your pace
less.
is, honestly. I could ca I care that you're there, like, I care about you being there, and I'm happy you're there, but when it comes to, like, whatever pace we're running, I really just don't care. Unless you're my athlete, I'm coaching you, and I'm trying to give you a specific workout, then I care about that, in a different way, but this is, like, when I'm at a run and there's just random people there, like, I guarantee you I'm more concerned about me. Like, do you know what
I
I
think,
mean? Like,
yeah,
about my own pace. I don't care what you're in.
yeah, one of the things that I would recommend then, if this is something that you struggle with, just go and spectate a race. Really. I mean,
Mm,
if you want to just go and just maybe look, find like a local like half marathon or a marathon that's in your area and just go spectate it just for a little bit. You don't have to stay there the whole time. I really came to that realization when I started doing triathlon because the people that were racing, there was all kinds of body types.
mm,
Nobody looked the same, and
mm.
everybody was still out there doing what they do. Some didn't look like they were having a very good time doing it, but they they finished it.
They
But the
finished.
look on their face when they crossed
They
that
were
finish
paid.
line was a one of like incredible satisfaction. And
Yeah.
so I think that that really kind of helps drive home the diversity of the sport. And
Uh-huh.
no, you don't have to look a particular way to perform in a certain way. Nobody's judging you. They're more concerned about their own paces than what you're doing. And so I think, and
And
the races are
yeah.
incredibly inspiring.
And you'll see people out, like, cheering, and they're cheering for, and people
Complete
are
strangers. Yeah,
cheering
people that they
for
don't even know, and they're out
strangers,
there
and they're
cheering.
cheering for the fastest, the person out front and the person out in the very back. People are still
Yep.
cheering. They're just generally happy, that you're out there, and nobody's saying, "I don't think that person's a runner," because 'cause they're just, plodding along or whatever. They
Yeah.
don't look like a runner. At least maybe back in the day, that was the case. I mean, there's a lot of history of even women's running that is interesting on how we were judged, you know, for our bodies and things like that. But I think now it's so, so inclusive, I think. I mean, that's my experience. I mean, as a when I was doing triathlon, I don't know, I care I feel like I called myself a triathlete, but I also identified strongly still as a runner, so I never maybe really fully embraced
Yeah.
myself as a triathlete, but in either way, I feel like I did have some of that almost like imposter syndrome thing a little bit, especially starting out, because I would just tell people, "Hey, I'm just I'm just doing these other sports because I'm doing cross training for running. Like, I'm not like I'm not a triathlete. I'm just doing this because I'm cross training to be a better runner, So, I mean, I think so, even then, just because perhaps I was a little bit afraid that I looked like an imposter with my cheap bike. And I don't know, I probably had a fairly okay wetsuit, but I didn't have any other fancy equipment. I'd never done triathlon before. So, but I think once I got going with it, I was way more comfortable in it, but I do remember kind of feeling there was a little bit of, like, judgment sometimes, and I think it probably was mostly myself thinking that
Yeah.
too. So, I mean, I feel like I'm not saying that, like, I've always completely been yes, I've always been able to self-identify, and I never feel like there might be some judgment myself, but, now looking back on it, I don't think people were probably really even judging me hardly at all. You know what I mean? Like, they
Right.
probably weren't. In fact, they were probably impressed when I was shooting up the hill on my
Yeah.
you know, it was when going on the other side when I had the disadvantage because I didn't have the arrow,
Uh,
and I didn't have the weight to, like, pull me down the hill very fast, but you know what I mean? So,
yeah.
it's just kind of thinking of it, like, I think it happens to us all a little bit, but hopefully this kinda gets I just want people to kinda think about it, to be a little bit more, like, thinking about their own things they tell themselves, like what they're telling themselves about their sport or what they're doing, and how that might be maybe, like, more of a potentially, like, a detriment to themselves and their ability to even consistently continue in the sport. Because if we tell ourselves we're something maybe slow or that we're not actually a runner at all, then the likelihood that we wouldn't be continuing with it is probably a bit higher. My perspective is that you'd want to be continuing you want to be doing something that's going to have, like, such positive benefit in your life, and there's so many positives to participating in sports and being part of the community of, running community because it's such a generally positive community that, it would be a shame if you're of what you're telling yourself is why you don't continue to do it, right?
Yeah,
So
we hear
exactly.
so many times from athletes, hey, how do I get faster? How do I get faster? Whatever the sport is, it doesn't really matter.
Mhm.
I think that if you want to find out one ingredient to becoming faster is the internal dialogue that you tell
Yeah.
yourself, because your speed isn't going to increase if you continue to perpetuate the self-talk that you're
No,
not
absolutely.
faster. So get that self-talk squared away, and then you'll start to see some development actually start to materialize as you start to put in the work that goes with it, because you can't just change your self-talk and not do the stuff that's going to improve it. You're not going to become faster because you're going to tell yourself, I'm faster. It doesn't work
Yeah,
that
that's
way.
true.
But you can't become faster unless you start to reinforce it internally in your own mind that this is what I'm working on. These are my goals. I'm not that same person. I'm getting faster. This is working. And then it
And it's a
comes.
process. It's not gonna be like you're
Absolutely.
starting and you're gonna be fast the day, you start. In fact, I was just finished listening to, Kira D'Amato's book, Don't Call It a Comeback, and
Hmm.
what fascinated me about her book was she had been a runner in high school and college and then did have a short stint of, like, professional running and then it didn't go well. Anyways, she kinda got out of it, and then she had a couple of kids, and then she started to get back into running, and, I don't wanna tell her story, but it's just interesting. She started and she could barely run. I really resonated with her story. I thought her book was really fun and interesting, and I liked it because it kind of like we see her now as this, like, record-breaking marathoner and half marathoner, and she's, obviously a very quick, speedy runner, but she, um, kind of had to start from this, like, like, some of her story includes some of her races that she's done, and I would not at all call it at any point slow, but it's
Yeah.
just that she had this she didn't just, like, decide to start running again and just immediately break records, right? It takes time, and no, not all of us are gonna be able to start running and training, like, on a daily basis and be able to be, like, as fast. It takes some talent and obviously genetics as well to get to that point, but what I'm trying to say is that it's consistency, it's showing up, it's, putting the work in and putting the workouts in, and you're gonna be able to get,
Yeah.
faster, whatever that is for you. But just because you're not as fast as, I don't know, Kira D'Amato or somebody like that doesn't mean you're slow either,
Yeah.
So, like, but I do think it's if you're telling yourself that you're slow or that you're not capable of that, then I think you do hold yourself back. I think sometimes that's where I think it is, like, something that's kind of inspired me is watching these other, like, masters women runners be pretty quick. It's like this thought in my head of, like, I could be that. I can be faster. Like, if these people can get
Yeah.
faster, I can get so I almost feel like sometimes there's, like, a self-limitation that I've had about how quick I could be, and now I wish I had come to this epiphany, like, 20 years ago. Because I think what was holding me back was I never thought about how fast or how quick or how I could be. And now I have this, like, almost epiphany of, like, yeah, I I believe I can be a quicker runner. Like, I believe that I can achieve a certain, time or a certain goal, and I really think I can do it, and I think that's that mental side is when you really believe you can accomplish something, like, it's a powerful tool. As long as it's within reason, right? I'm not going out there and telling people I'm gonna try to get the Olympic qualifying time in the marathon the next time I run, because that might not be feasible, but it's just believing I can do something, that maybe previously I wasn't sure I could do. You know what I mean? Like, so it's that sort of mentality as well of that belief in yourself and that confidence and that, and again, that self identity. But all right, so I think we
So
kind of,
I
I
think,
don't want to beat the dead horse there, but like,
yeah, the one thing that I do want to say though is that just like the physical adaptation is a process, to become proficient at your sport, so is the mental and the identity side of it. It's
mhm,
not
right,
something that just happens overnight. And I can definitely attest to that. It's taken me over 10 years to
right.
kind of like really change and adapt my identity. And so, it's like, it just doesn't happen
It
quickly.
doesn't, but I
And it
think the
has to be
quick rate,
purposeful.
yeah,
You
it
have
has
to
to be
purposefully work
Yeah,
at it.
but I think
It's not
that's the thing,
easy.
you have to be aware of it, and I think the quicker you can identify the negative self-talk and the things that we're
Yeah.
talking about and try it doesn't like you just tell yourself you're a runner, you tell yourself you're something and you're gonna be that. It takes a work to get there, but I think what I'm encouraging people to do is to really be introspective on how they're talking to themselves about it and what the things that they're doing that might be holding themselves back a little bit or sort of putting their identity, such as I'm a slow runner. Yes, you're a runner and but you're calling yourself a slow runner. That's now your identity. And I think just being aware of what we're saying about ourselves, and trying to be more positive about it. Like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of how you could reframe that. Like, or just try to say like I'm a runner instead of I'm a slow runner and just really trying to
Yeah.
reframe that into like taking that negative
Just take those adjectives
talk
off.
out of it. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
just rely on the nouns.
You
That's
don't
all
even
you
have to call
need.
yourself a fast runner, just I'm a runner, like it doesn't matter what my pace is. I do wanna talk, I know just in the sake of time, I wanna talk a little bit because 'cause we're talking a lot about the positive parts of identity, but I do wanna
Mhm.
talk a little bit about some of the negative
Gotcha.
sides
Yeah.
of identity because you have some of your experiences with, like, the injury and kind of having that realization of, "Oh my gosh, maybe this is gonna be taken away from me." So, I'll share a little bit about my own
Mhm.
experiences with that. So I kind of have had an identity crisis related to running. And so I kind of feel like I've kind of been there personally. But so I started in middle school, I ran all through high school, and then I got to college and I walked on to the University of Colorado, so CU Boulder, which at the time was one of the best running schools in the nation. And that's a whole story on its own of like why I even decided I wanted to go there and run for them. In retrospect, I'm not sure that was the best decision because when I got there, it's very competitive. Running like the whole culture there was way different than high school. There was a lot of pressures. When I was starting to do better, I wasn't getting recognized for it. Like I was beating athletes who were on scholarships and felt like, I wasn't getting recognized for that. So
Mhm.
I was just burning out essentially. I wasn't enjoying it anymore. I wanted to be a normal college student. Like I was kind of struggling with the running. I identified strongly as a student athlete, but I think there was other parts of it I was struggling with. So when I decided to stop running for the team after like 3 years, I didn't realize like what crisis would happen to me, like what would happen to me when I decided to stop. So I decided to stop running and my whole identity as a student athlete and a runner was now abruptly taken away, like essentially because I was so burnt out of running. So you would think, well, why would that be such a big deal? Because you were, burnt out. But I mean, like maybe I needed a little bit of a break, but the way it happened and what ended up happening to my identity was very negative thing. So
Yeah.
I kind of went through what I would call like an identity crisis and no longer being a student athlete, which was something I think had a lot of pride in. And then also just kind of being ambiguous in this giant school where all of a sudden I had no idea, like I had no identity was really, really hard. And I struggled with a lot of, just emotional like depression. I partied a little bit too much. I think I kind of went to the opposite extreme and that probably wasn't good. I would argue not good at all. And really, really struggled, and it took me a while, to finally kinda get back to running and start running again, and took me a little bit of time to kinda get my identity back as a runner, and I did eventually come back to it, but it can be when I think in that instance, so much of my identity was in running and as a student athlete. I didn't have a lot of friends outside of that, or didn't have a lot of things going on outside of that. And so when that was taken away or when I decided to not do it anymore, that was just a real crisis. And so I do think like that, what we want to make sure is that we have an identity as a runner, but that's not maybe our identity as a triathlete or an athlete, but that is not entirely our identity, right? So now I fully recognize like I am a runner, but I'm also a mother. I also am a registered dietitian or a coach, but I'm also like also an artist. I like to do art, although I don't do it very often anymore because of time. But there's so many other things that I like to do that if I lose running, yes, I would be again like yes, I would be it would be hard and there'd be pain and a feeling of loss, but I would not spiral out of control into an oblivion of depression, hopefully,
Mhm.
because I have other aspects of myself as well. So I think that's an important thing, a lesson I learned in that instance of like, I need to be more than just this one thing, also.
I can say that this is probably something that I've struggled with a lot. I have that personality where it's just like all in. You're either all in or you're all out. There's no like middle ground with me. Something that I'm working on, but I, I can say that I've probably dabbled along the same lines where I over identified um, as what I was doing. So even though I didn't identify as a triathlete, I said, I do triathlons, but I put everything into that. And I probably over identified as somebody who was doing triathlons. And so when it came to, defining on how good or, how good I was, I always went to that performance driven calculations on, trying to qualify the quality of an athlete that I was based on some kind of quantity, some number. I definitely experienced all those losses of purpose after various injuries that I had. There was one time where, now this was something that was really, really stupid, but I had developed plantar fasciitis in one foot and then I didn't stop. And so I developed plantar fasciitis in the other foot at the same time. I proceeded to do like 3 half Ironman, a couple Olympics, I think 2 half marathons, all in this time frame where I had plantar fasciitis in both feet. It took me 6 months of nothing, to repair the damage that I had done. And I went through another identity crisis there because I couldn't run and all that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed running. And I was like, man, what am I doing? I really, really struggled.
Right.
And so it's really indicative of like when you start to experience these things and the chaos that ensues in your life because of some loss or a setback is a red flag.
Uh-huh.
It's something that should be paid attention to. And I'm speaking in terms of from my own personal experiences. I mean, like you said,
Right.
we're not psychologists, but I've experienced this myself.
Yeah, I think it's hard because we put so much into our sport, and I
Yeah.
think we put so much work into it, and it becomes so much of our identity because maybe we are doing a lot of my friends are runners, a lot of the running things,
Hmm.
a lot of my social things I'm involved with now, anyways, are with runners because it's like it's easy for me to run and socialize. I don't have a lot of other time in my life to do other things and have other types of friends right now. So, I mean, I'm friends with you, but I mean, like, it's
Yeah.
like, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't have a lot of social time otherwise. So it does revolve a lot around running. I think and that's common for many people. So I do think it's just worth kind of thinking. I think it's having that exercise. If you haven't had an injury that's kind of forced you to have these,
Yeah.
or just different aspects of things happening, like with me with the burnout and then stopping the running team in college, like having those kind of crises can be like a crisis in your identity can be like n- a hard learning lesson because you kind of have to figure it out. But I do think if that hasn't happened to you and you're really identified or really set and running and you have a huge identity in it, to really do the exercise of what happens if I can't run? Like what happens if tomorrow I get a really like debilitating injury or heaven forbid something happens and I cannot run? Like how am I going to be? And if your answer is like it's going to be the end of the world and my life is going to, everything is gonna be horrible, then I think you need to really think about it a little bit more of like almost like not plan for it, but just kind of think it through. Like, okay, well, what can you
Yeah.
do? Because I think for me, like the second time that I sort of took a significant break from running was when I was also kind of not burnt out of it. It was when I like back in 2017, I had kind of like this epic year of doing like the Boston Marathon. I did a Spartan, I did a 50-mile trail race. I just sort of did all these things and I was like, I'm kind of done with running. I'm sick of training hard. I'm
Yeah.
sick of I started to get I had some pressure on me for that I think was more self-imposed pressure to be accomplishing these things. And so I'm like, I'm going to take a break, but this time I kind of did it on my own terms, which was different than when you're sort of it's forced on you. But
Yeah.
that's when I started powerlifting. And so it was like I just kind of like switched to another, but that's part of it too, is I'm like, if I can't run because I've had this experience doing like another type of activity, well, I could always do powerlifting if I have two legs still. And I can always I could always, I guess start like biking, on the gravel bike roads because I've had biking before. So I think like just kind of working through like how would you kind of cope with it and what can you do? And maybe is there other aspects that aren't even related to athletics that you can kind of identify with too? So it's not like I'm not a psychologist, so I can't say this is how you would, like we're saying, we're not telling you this is how,
Yeah.
but I think it's worth like thinking about like what happens if I can't run for an injury, or even if you're just kind of feeling like you're burning out of it and you need a break, like what's your plan so that you don't go through what I did and have some sort of crisis along with that you weren't anticipating. So, yeah, I don't think either of us can tell someone how to cope with that, or, what the steps are to figure out your identity and not be so much of your identity in running. But I think it's just interesting because we both been through it. We both had some identity, both the positive aspects of the identity piece, and then also like the drawbacks of it as well.
Yeah.
And I don't think either of us have like an exact answer for how you cope with it, other than maybe it's worth thinking about what is your identity and with running, and then what other identities or what other things do you have, like
Right.
how are you as like a whole person, so that this is just a part of your life but not the entire thing, so that if something does happen, you're prepared for it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I
But
had that experience after I had my surgery, and I couldn't run, I couldn't ride, I couldn't swim, I couldn't do anything. And so I said, well, I've spent all these years in, doing this sport. It's become who I am, because if I don't have a workout, and this is the way it is today, if I don't have a workout one day, I feel off.
Mhm.
Something. It's like
Mhm.
it's like you're walking around, and you're just like, I've forgotten something. You know that nagging
Yeah.
feeling that you've got in your mind. It's like, I've forgotten something, but I don't know what I've forgotten. That's what it's
Right.
like in my brain if I don't have a workout that day. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. And they're just like, but you need to take a rest day. You're not supposed to be working out 7 days a week. And I was like, dude, for my mental health, I've got to have something going on. I just have
Right.
to be
Interesting.
purposeful the way that I the way that I do
Yeah.
it. But that's when I found like the endurance hiking. I was like, well, if I can't do the stuff that I really want, what can I do? And it forced me to kind of start searching. And I was just blessed enough to have my wife sitting on the couch one night saying, hey, this might be something that you're interested in. You can't do all this. You can't do the stuff that you used to do. Maybe you'll check this out. And lo and
Right.
behold, it got me through the time that I needed to get through, and still kept me engaged and working forward and doing
Mhm.
stuff. And I'm extremely thankful that I
Right.
had that experience. It wasn't an easy experience by any means, both mentally and physically, but it was definitely something that I'm glad I had to go through, because it forced me to look outside of the sport and say, well, if I can't do it, what can I do?
Mhm.
So knowing full well that it's still going to be a really emotional time period to go through, because it's almost like you're mourning. It's like
Yeah, there is a
you're
morning.
grieving a process that has become so ingrained into you.
Mhm.
And I almost describe the sport as like it's part of my DNA, even though it's a
Right.
really like exaggeration
And I
of,
think
the
that's a
importance
good
that I put
thing,
on
like,
it. But yeah,
you're so focused on it, and I don't want that to be, but I think that just that preparation is probably gonna have if you couldn't do the sport, you probably will have a grieving process, because it
yeah,
is like you're losing something in a way, and injuries can be that way as well, especially depending on how severe the injury is, and so anticipating that, but also like, okay, is there something there that you can do to help you feel like you are able to cope with it, or have some sort of continued progress even if you're not able to run. Like when I had a meniscus injury a couple years ago, I had to take some time off, like a couple months from running at least. So it wasn't like a significant injury, but it kind of went from like being really disappointed and mourning, and just like because I had been sort of on this upward trajectory of getting back into running
yeah,
and making progress, and like I had taken time off with my son when I had him, and then I was just kind of running for fun, and I was finally back in it. I was finally training again on a regular basis. I was gonna do some races, and then I got this thing, right? And it's just like, and I ended up getting a couple. strange injuries on and off that year that really just kind of I would have all this progress and then it would be like coming like all of a
Yeah.
sudden so it was for me like kind of having that process of mourning it, but not letting myself sit there for too long, kind of like,
Yes.
okay, I'm gonna allow myself to be upset about this. I'm gonna allow myself to be angry and upset and sad. And then I'm gonna try to make forward progress. So what do I need to do to heal? What do I need to do to what can I do? So I could ironically do anything else but run. I could row, I could lift heavy. For some reason, I could do all these other things, but anytime I went out and ran, it was
Yeah.
hurting. My knee would hurt a lot. So that was I was grateful because I could do other things. But the one thing I loved to do was at least temporarily taken away. But I could focus on all these other things and keeping myself strong and keeping my aerobic fitness as best I could in that process. So you kind of have to let yourself mourn it, but my suggestion is to then try to formulate some sort of plan of how what you're, if it's an injury, like then you're sort of putting a lot of your energy that you would have put into running into
Yeah.
into
Hmm.
healing, you know what I mean? And recovering and recuperating and PT and strength and all those other things. Though, yeah, letting yourself mourn, but then don't let yourself go too deep. Don't let it become weeks and months.
Yeah.
That's my suggestion. Let yourself have that moment of disappointment and then try to kind of formulate your plan of like how you're going to cope. What other things, maybe now you have an opportunity, you have more time on your hands. So what can you do with that extra time that you hadn't had chance to do before, right? Like thinking of it, framing it a little bit differently. That might be something to think
Put a
about. It's
time
hard though.
limit
I
on
can't
it.
say it's easy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean that's something that I went through right after Ironman Florida, the half Ironman in Florida last year at the end of was it 2025. When I got off of that, and that tibia tendonitis that I had was pretty hot, and so I said, well, what can I do? What can I do now? So I said, well, I put all of this focus and attention and purposeful behavior towards training. I need to then take that skill set that I've developed and learned how to do to be purposeful and then refocus it towards rehab. So if that
Hmm.
means that now my workouts are infrared sauna and cold tub to where I was doing that contrast therapy, the PT strengthening stuff, being purposeful with it. It really helped get me through that period because I felt focused. There was something that I could direct my attention towards. But
Hmm.
I think it's like you said, it's also important to allow for that grieving period. So something that you could say is like, look, I'm giving myself 4 days. At the end of the fourth day, I'm putting my pants on and we're doing something else. So
Right.
you
Yeah,
you
exactly. That's
do allow for that time period to process the emotion because you don't want to jump directly into something else as a way of you know way of not dealing with the emotion that's coming
right.
from the original situation, yet you don't want to wallow in it too long, and because then you'll find yourself stuck and it's harder to get out of it. So
Right.
put a time limit on
Absolutely.
it. That'd be my suggestion.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great. And then start to think about, okay, what can I do? And
Yeah.
I mean, unless it's a, life-threatening injury or you've lost your legs or something very catastrophic, which I hope happens to nobody because that would be very traumatizing, but most of the time it's something that, we can work through and it's just an injury or maybe it is something like burnout and then allowing yourself like I did, like, okay, I need to take a little bit of a break, but I know that if I just abruptly take a break without a plan for something else, that I can be
It's
sort of working
worse.
towards, it's
Yeah.
not good. So what am I going to do now? Well, I'm going to change gears completely and do something way out of my wheelhouse. I mean, really, I didn't miss running too much during that time frame because I was so focused on the strength training and building muscle and it was fun and different, and it allowed me to try something different, and then when I came back to running, I was very ready,
Yeah.
So sometimes we do need those things as well, but I think, yeah, just I hope that's helpful for people. I think we kind of covered a lot of both kind of the positives and negatives of identity. I think we kind of covered that particular piece of our internal dialogue. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on identity
I
or any
don't, yeah, I don't have
last
much. I
thoughts.
think that we've kind of put forth a good argument for why it's something that we should think about.
Mhm.
We've shared some of our own personal
Nice.
experiences, so hopefully you could take those experiences and not make the same mistakes, or at
Or
least
take our advice, like, from what
learn
we've
from it,
learned
and
from it.
you know do things differently, start to reframe your inner dialogue, if that's kind of holding you back. I think that this has been definitely a vulnerable episode, especially for me. So if somebody is helped by it, it's worth it. The vulnerability is
Yeah,
worth
I think there's some vulnerability for me as well. I just don't think I've shared a lot of my college journey too much. I think part of me has been afraid to speak out a little bit because I still know people that feel positive things towards the coach I had in college, and they're people I respect, teammates that were with me, ran with me that I respect, and so I've been hesitant. I
Yeah,
just kind of mentioned I burned out, but there's other dynamics to that, that some at some point I might share more in like a maybe as part of my running series that I do with the marathon, I might maybe have a more vulnerable episode that I share a little
yeah.
more of that because that's part of my journey.
It's freeing.
But it's my journey, right? Like people could have had the same team, the same coach, but their experiences are totally different.
Absolutely.
But I know that I'm not totally alone in my experience because of recent events that have happened and that coach had been fired due to some of the issues that I experienced. So I know I
Yeah.
was not alone, but I do know and respect athletes who have happened to really love um, the coach. I think other people identify with it. And I think for you, Justin, I think there are so many other people that will identify with what you're gone through. I think you're feeling vulnerable, but I think what you have to share is so helpful for other people. So, I thank you. I think you're maybe feeling like it in a negative way, but I think it's actually really positive because I do think there are so many people that can identify with that and or starting their own journey and have had a similar experience, whether or not they've had like the surgery or not, but maybe they're losing weight or they're just starting out. And I think to hear what you have to say is hopefully helps them along their journey.
I hope so. It's definitely helped me reframe my inner dialogue by being a little bit more vulnerable and a little bit more outspoken about, my past experiences and how I got into the
Right.
sport, and then the role that faith plays in my
Mhm.
life and in the sport and in my business. I think once I started to be a little bit more open about this stuff, it really was kind of like an emptying of the soul bucket, because all this stuff starts to fill
Yeah.
up, fill up, fill up. And then it just kind of, if you dump it, you start to feel lighter and you just feel freer. And if it does help somebody, then that was the reason that I had to go through it. And the reason that the experiences were the way they were was because it was put into my life to help somebody else. I'm a firm
Mhm.
believer in that. So
Yeah, that's true.
I'll take it. But
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking if I could help somebody else with maybe some of my experiences, if it's just one or two people, I
it's
still
worth
think
it.
it's worth talking about, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, we'll end there. I think that was
Yeah, so
kind
we
of
want to thank you
a
guys
good
for
ending.
joining us. So this has been episode 71 of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, where we talked about athlete identity as one of our coaches' corners. And we want to thank you guys for spending the time with us. It does not is not taken for granted, and we really do appreciate that. Again, if you're enjoying the content that's coming out from us and you find it useful in your journey, we would greatly appreciate a review and a comment on whatever platform it is that you're consuming your podcasts from. Also, as a reminder, we do have the YouTube channel that is for the podcast, the Endurance Athlete Journey on YouTube. We upload every single episode to that as well. If you log in and you can see the collaborations, you'll see some additional videos that are under the collaborations. It's stuff that I'm starting to push out as well, with stuff that I'm producing under Tabula Rasa Racing, but it's in conjunction with what we're doing here at the podcast. So there's some additional content that's uploaded to that site as well. And so you're free to check that out. Leave comments, leave reviews. Those are monitored regularly and greatly appreciated. So again, thank you so much for the time that you spend with us and the support that you continue to share the podcast. I've been your host, Coach Justin, along with Coach Katie, and we thank you guys and happy training, everyone. See you,
Yep.
Katie.
Thank you. Bye.
That wraps up today's episode of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Endurance sports have a way of teaching us patience, humility, and resilience, lessons that carry far beyond the workout. Progress in endurance sports doesn't come from shortcuts. It comes from consistency, discipline, and doing the work when it's not glamorous. Wherever you are on your endurance journey, keep trusting the process and honoring the work you put in each day. If today's episode resonated, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone to help on their endurance journey. Don't forget to join the conversation on our social sites to help build and foster a community where we all learn and support one another. We'll be back with more stories and insights from Coach Justin and Katie. Until then, visit the podcast website at theenduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com for more episodes from the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Feel free to send us an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularossaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.